4:41, Saxony airspace. The sun hasn't broken yet, but the sky is already alive. Cold vapor trails stretch west, thin and angry, scarring the upper stratosphere like whip marks. Below them, far below, closer to the whispering ground haze, a single American aircraft climbs against protocol, against doctrine, and against time. It isn't supposed to be there. Not yet. Not alone. And yet there it is, an olive-drab P-51 Mustang with unmarked wingtips, dulled canopy glass, and exhaust burn along both engine flanks. From a distance it looks ordinary, but from above, it's all wrong. The wings are wrong. They're wider, not by much, maybe just enough to be missed by the untrained eye. But anyone who's flown a stock Mustang would see it immediately. The altered angle of incidence, the subtle bulge near the root, the extra rivets along the underside seam that don't belong in any factory diagram. Field mod. Unauthorized. Illegal, maybe, but functional. Very. This is no standard Mustang, and this is no standard morning. 5 German Me-262s are on intercept vectors, jet fighters, the best of the Third Reich, faster than anything in the sky, each armed with 4 30mm cannons and enough thrust to leave a Mustang choking in vapor. They're diving from 31,000 feet. Bracketed formation, loose but lethal. And Branson, the pilot in the modified P-51, doesn't even flinch. He doesn't dive, he doesn't run. He turns into them. Why? Because this isn't the first time, and because Ernie Sokol's scrap metal wing mod was built for exactly this moment. 3 days earlier, on a busted airstrip outside Gera, Sokol had cut and welded salvaged flaps from a B-25 wing root to extend the chord length of the Mustang's wingtip by 4.3%. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't sanctioned, it wasn't even properly tested. But what it gave Branson was more lift at high speed, better roll stability above 400 mph, and most of all, faster recovery from snap turns at altitude. And now 5 Me-262s are about to learn what that means. Branson throttles up, not full burn, just enough to bait. He dips slightly, pretends to flee. The jets dive harder, faster, confident. It's what they've been trained for, speed dominance, boom and zoom tactics, crush the slower target in one pass. But at 27,500 feet, the Mustang reverses. Suddenly, sharply, too sharply. The nose snaps left, the wing holds, and the entire aircraft enters a tightening, climbing spiral that should cause the plane to stall, or at least vibrate uncontrollably. But it doesn't, because the modded wing is doing something unexpected. Holding shape, holding lift, holding the line. The lead 262 overshoots. The second tries to cut under. Too late. The third wobbles under unexpected G-load and pulls out wide. And the fourth and fifth? They hesitate, and that's enough. Branson levels, spins left, and re-enters a second spiral, this one inverted. A full negative G roll over the top of a jet pass. Something no standard Mustang would even attempt at that altitude. But this one does. Clean, crisp, controlled. On the ground, 2 spotters at an advanced air warning station stare through their rangefinders in disbelief. One says, "That can't be a P-51. The other replies, "Then what the hell is it?" And up in the sky, Branson stabilizes, engine whistling from overburn, wings flexing under thermal strain, but still flying. Behind him, the 262s are scattered, trying to regroup, radioing for fuel status. They've lost the bubble. The Mustang has escaped, not by outrunning them, but by outmaneuvering their assumptions. This wasn't a victory measured in kills. It was a victory measured in angles. The kind of geometry that Sokol drew on a scrap napkin in a mess hall. The kind of maneuver no war manual approved. The kind of moment that lives not in film reels, but in the memory of every German pilot who watched a slower plane do something impossible and vanish. This was the moment they stopped laughing. For years, the myth held strong. Piston planes were finished. Jets were the future. And in the sky above Europe, that future came screaming in at over 500 miles, ripping apart the old rules of air combat. The Me-262, Germany's revolutionary jet, had rewritten the script: climb fast, dive faster, fire, and disappear. Against it, the best piston fighters in the Allied inventory looked outdated, slower in raw speed, clumsier in dive recovery, and tactically obsolete above 25,000 feet. But myths are comfortable lies wrapped in averages, and averages don't survive dogfights. The claim was simple: no P-51 Mustang could outmaneuver a Me-262 once both aircraft were moving over 400 mph. Jet thrust, so the logic went, produced too much velocity and energy retention for a piston-driven fighter to counter. In any head-on engagement or pursuit climb, the outcome was supposedly a foregone conclusion. Except it wasn't. Because the math that built the Me-262 was elegant, but vulnerable. At high speeds, the 262's biggest advantage, its velocity, became a liability. The faster it moved, the less time it had to correct. Its roll rate flattened out. Its turn radius ballooned. Its cannons, though powerful, needed sustained lock-on, something difficult to achieve against a fighter with high-roll agility. The Mustang, on the other hand, wasn't bound by thrust delay. It had instant torque. Mechanical linkage between control surface and pilot meant response was immediate. Not perfect, but instantaneous. At high speed, especially during spirals or reversals, this gave it options. And one well-timed reversal was all it took to erase a firing window. But none of that mattered in doctrine, in training manuals, in briefings. In the minds of many commanders, jets were untouchable. American fighter groups were told to avoid prolonged engagement. If it's silver and screaming, dive away. If it chases, dodge, never follow. That was the standing rule, until one mechanic and one rogue pilot decided to question the dogma. Ernie Sokol, airframe specialist and former dirt track flyer, didn't believe in absolutes. He believed in data, and his field notes showed something strange. Under certain wing conditions, Mustangs weren't just stable at 420 mph. They were nimble. Given the right shape, they could recover from snap rolls in under 3 seconds. More importantly, they could hold that roll. That's when the theory cracked. Because in those moments, brief as they were, the P-51 had maneuver superiority. Not forever. Not even for long. But just enough. Enough to dodge a cannon burst, enough to bait an overshoot, enough to shift the fight from jet dominance to piston survival. It wasn't about turn radius anymore. It was about response velocity, how fast a pilot could change direction, angle, or energy state. The Mustang's real strength wasn't top-end speed. It was control fidelity. And when you paired that with a modded wing that reduced roll lag by 43%, you didn't just survive jets, you confused them. Sokol and Branson weren't trying to break the myth. They were trying to survive. But in the process, they revealed something the manuals never predicted. That under the right conditions, with the right wing and the right maneuver, a Mustang could turn tighter than a jet, not because it was better, but because the jet pilot didn't expect it to. And in air combat, surprise isn't just advantage, it's lethal. By early 1945, the European skies were choked with machines, bombers in waves, fighters in swarms, recon planes slicing through contrails. But beneath that chaos, on busted runways near tree lines and improvised hangars built from canvas in desperation, another war was being fought. The war to keep the planes in the air. And this wasn't about strategy. It was about scrap, about finding ways to make bent steel fly one more mission, about solving airflow issues with hacksaws, about rewelding wing spars under moonlight. That's where Ernie Sokol thrived. Officially, he was a TS Jart, technical sergeant in a frontline maintenance crew. Unofficially, he was the guy everyone went to when the checklist said unrepairable. He wasn't a licensed engineer. He didn't have factory schematics. What he had was time in the seat, from dirt tracks in Michigan to test flights in Oregon, and a brain that measured angles faster than most officers could read a gauge. In his corner of the field, things didn't break the same way. They broke better. One day, a Mustang came in with a stress fracture along the wing root. The spec said it was grounded. The command said, salvage. So-called said, give me 72 hours. He didn't repair it. He replaced it. With what? B-25 flap panels, modified, inverted, reshaped, matched and riveted at a slope no manual authorized. The result wasn't factory safe. But it flew, smoother than before, and that got his gears turning. Why settle for repair when you could redesign? It wasn't long before every aircraft assigned to his crew had something unofficial. Better radiator seals, rewired control feedback, and even improvised oxygen line reroutes to reduce pilot blackout risk during snap rolls. If the brass ever noticed, they looked the other way, because his planes came back. That's where Jack Branson met him. Branson wasn't a star, not yet. But he was fast, aggressive, curious. And when he felt his Mustang stiffen during an emergency dive near Remagen, he knew something was wrong. The pitch angle had locked too early. Response lagged, and if he hadn't pulled throttle, the airframe would have torn. He limped the plane back and found Sokol under another Mustang, sleeves rolled, cigarette in his teeth. The conversation was short. Need more response above 400, Branson said. Sokol didn't look up. Stock won't give it to you, he muttered. I know, Branson replied. Can you? And just like that, the seed was planted. Sokol began sketching, not on blueprints but on scraps. Engine crates, fuel receipts, broken propeller blades. His solution wasn't elegant, it wasn't symmetrical. But it worked. A subtle wing modification that extended lift surface just enough to reduce stall onset at high-speed angles and, critically, increased roll rate recovery during reversal maneuvers. He called it the curve. And the command never signed off on it. But they didn't stop it either. Because once the MOD went up, Branson's Mustang stopped stalling in sharp dives. It stopped lagging in pitch-up recovery. It started flying like it wanted to fight at 400 motor 20 miles. And this wasn't just one plane. Within 3 weeks, 2 more pilots requested the same mod. A fourth asked for a variant. Sokol obliged, each time with minor tweaks. No two were alike, but each flew like hell. And in the bars, in the bunkhouses, in the whispered places where pilots admitted fear, word spread. There's a Mustang up north that dances like a Spitfire, but climbs like a rocket. Nobody said the name. But everyone knew the man behind it was bending the airframe, bending the specs, and bending reality. Because in 1945, on a front where jets ruled the sky and command favored numbers, Sokol was building Frankenfighters, aircraft stitched from wreckage and rebellion. And he wasn't doing it for glory. He was doing it because the math said it might work, because the machine deserved better, and because he hated watching men die due to paperwork. That's the world this story was born in, not in the labs, not in the strategy rooms, but in the grease-stained corners where the rulebook ended and survival began. It doesn't take a genius to know jets were faster, but what most people never saw, not in the footage, not in the combat reports, not in the history books, was the other half of the equation. How long a plane could hold its edge under pressure. Not top speed, not rate of climb, but how fast it could pivot, how deep it could turn before tearing itself apart, and how long it could survive when numbers stopped working and geometry took over. That's where the Mustang's myth met its limit. The stock P-51D had excellent speed, range, and firepower. It was a near-perfect balance of agility and endurance. But above 400 miles per hour, and especially above 20,000 feet, the airframe got twitchy. Elevator response softened. Roll control lagged. The aircraft could dive like a bullet, but snap roll recoveries became sluggish. Ailerons stiffened. The G-load window narrowed. Factory spec put the maximum sustained turn at around 5.4 Gs at 15,000 feet, But above 25,000 in combat configuration, that dropped fast. By contrast, the Me-262, while heavier and less agile, could maintain high-speed passes with brutal effectiveness. It had a flatter acceleration curve. It didn't need to turn. It needed one pass, one shot. That was the doctrine. What so-called wing mod changed was not speed, but reliability under stress. He extended effective wing surface area by 4.3% through reshaped tips and customized B-25 flap segments, welded into the Mustang's outer profile. This alone dropped stall onset by 11.2% at high angles of attack. It also reduced lateral instability in rolling turns. Tests with Branson's plane showed a 43% decrease in roll recovery time at 410 to 430 mph. That meant less energy lost in each reversal, a critical edge when trying to bait a jet into overshooting. Torque figures were unchanged, but roll latency, the milliseconds between stick input and wing reaction, tightened. Branson reported, "It feels like the ailerons answer faster than I think, like they're waiting." Another brutal number? Load factor. So-called frame reinforcements using salvaged bomber spar plates allowed Branson to pull 8.2 Gs in one engagement. Brief, violent, but without structural failure. That's nearly 1.5 Gs above standard red line. Not sustainable, not advisable, but possible. And when it comes to evading a burst of 30mm fire traveling 800 feet per second, those extra 0.3 seconds of maneuvering can be the difference between a legend and a smoking crater. Let's break it down. Wing surface area increase, plus 4.3%. Stall angle improvement at high altitude, 11.2% lower onset. Roll response gain, 420 mph, 43% faster. Peak tested G load with reinforcement, 8.2 G versus stock, 6.5 G redline. Average jet lock-on window reduced, 6.1 sec, 2.7 sec. These aren't just technical stats. They're the kind of numbers that hurt, because they weren't supposed to exist. They came from welds that weren't approved, from rivets driven by hand, from wings reshaped in hangars lit by portable lanterns. The mod didn't make the Mustang faster. It made it more dangerous under pressure. It took a machine already feared and made it unpredictable. And for me, 262 pilots, that was worse than speed, because speed you can plan around. But a fighter that rolls tighter than physics predicts, that's how you lose a kill. That's how you bleed fuel trying to reacquire. That's how you break formation and find yourself alone, hunted by something that's supposed to be obsolete. So-called didn't care about theory. He cared about seconds. And his math said, if you could hold turn stability, just 0.9 seconds longer than the jet expected, the jet missed. Not every time, but enough. They did it in the dark. No flight approval, no formal test order, no engineer from Wright-Patterson walking the runway with a clipboard. Just a field hangar, 2 mechanics, and a Mustang nobody wanted to risk. It started with a tape measure, a piece of chalk, and 2 busted B-25 flaps Sokol had pulled from a crash site weeks earlier. He'd been staring at them every night like puzzle pieces that didn't belong. Until one night he measured the Mustang's wing again and whispered, "Too sharp. Not enough hold at the edge." Branson was the only pilot crazy enough to say yes. The plan wasn't to make the plane faster. That was impossible. What Sokol aimed for was responsiveness. He wasn't changing the core shape of the wing. He was altering how it behaved under compression at high speeds. His idea? Add surface, smooth the taper, and reinforce the outer spar with salvaged bomber-grade rivets. It would change the way airflow held during a high-speed roll, especially at 25,000-plus feet. He called it the curve. Branson called it stupid. But he flew it anyway. The first test was low altitude, over open farmland, dawn mission. Branson kept it under 280 mph, testing roll and trim response. Nothing cracked. Control surfaces felt heavier, but tighter. The Mustang didn't yaw as hard during throttle shifts. It tracked straighter in shallow banks. Second flight, 15,000 feet. They pushed it to 350 mph. He attempted a snap roll recovery, then a high G spiral exit. The left aileron groaned, but held. That was the first time Branson radioed in with a voice tight from G's but calm. She's not fighting back. The real test came on the third flight. Full loadout, combat config, no external tanks. Branson climbed to 23,000 feet, rolled the Mustang into a shallow dive, and opened her up. 420 mph. No flutter, no buffet, just raw angle control. The roll input came clean, not snappy, not like a Spitfire, but responsive. The Mustang didn't stall, it flowed. Branson threw it into a reversal loop, expecting to bleed speed and altitude. Instead, he climbed. The added wing surface gripped the air harder than the factory shape. The plane stayed inside the turn. That's when Branson tried something reckless. He inverted, rolled the Mustang into a belly-up glide, and yanked a full 6.5 G pullout. The left wing didn't crack, the rivets didn't shear, the flap extensions flexed, but returned. The only warning was a brief oscillation in the stick, the kind you only feel when you're riding the edge of lift decay. He brought it back after 31 minutes in the air, fuel low, engine hot, frame intact, and his first words to Sokol? She doesn't fly like a Mustang anymore. From that point on, the field tests became operational use, quietly. No forms, no briefings. Just Branson flying missions nobody else wanted. High-speed runs through jet-patrolled corridors. Bait and dodge maneuvers meant to test enemy reactions. Each time the Mustang came back. Each time the jets missed. The only visible change was in the wing profile. And even then, only if you knew what to look for. The slight arc near the tip, the added seam lines, the way the ailerons flexed under stress instead of locking. On paper, it wasn't supposed to help. In flight, it was the difference between being chased and escaping before they got tone. It wasn't just a mod. It was defiance in metal form. Sokol never wrote it down. Branson never explained it on reports. But the men on that strip started watching differently when his Mustang took off. They leaned into the sound of the takeoff, the way the wings cut air, the angle of the climb. Because somewhere deep inside, they knew. That thing up there wasn't stock. And one day soon, someone in a jet was going to find out what that really meant. Every jet pilot knew the pattern. Sight the target, dive from altitude, exploit superior thrust, open fire, climb away, reset. The Me-262 was engineered for that rhythm. It wasn't a turn fighter, it was a scalpel. Speed in, speed out. Built to shred bombers, not to dogfight. But that doctrine collapsed the moment it failed to land the kill. And that happened more than once. When Sokol's modded Mustang entered the sky, it didn't just change the roll rate, it changed the timing. And timing is the graveyard of certainty. Let's do the math. At 500 mph, a Me-262 covers 733 feet per second. That's a blink. 3, maybe 4 seconds max within a lethal gun window. The pilot has to identify, aim, stabilize the cannons, and fire within that window. But stabilization requires linear tracking, not just speed, but predictability from the target. That's exactly what Branson's Mustang denied them. With the increased wing area and adjusted aileron response, his aircraft could roll in under 2.1 seconds at 420 mph, compared to the standard 3.8 seconds in unmodified P-51Ds. That's a 45% reduction in time needed to invert, dodge, or reverse. So what does that do? It shrinks the 262's effective kill window. Dramatically, from 6 seconds to under 3. It means that by the time a jet closed in, acquired lock, and tried to stabilize, the Mustang had already rolled away. Every time. And this wasn't theoretical. After the third field mission, Branson's Mustang was reviewed for airframe stress. SOCOL measured deformation along the portside wing root, consistent with an 8+G load, meaning that Branson had pulled tighter turns than the Me-262 could follow without breaking formation or losing speed discipline. That's the other problem. Jet pilots had to conserve energy. Their fuel tanks were notoriously fragile. 262s often had just 7 minutes of safe throttle time in combat configuration. If they missed their first pass, they had to climb out fast or risk falling below escape speed. The Mustang didn't have that limitation. It could loiter, it could bait, it could reverse and re-engage from below. In one encounter logged in early April, Branson lured 2 Me-262s into repeated overshoots by dragging a false turn left, then snap-rolling right over a flak belt. The jets couldn't hold. Why? Because they weren't just chasing a plane. They were chasing a curve that didn't match the Mustang's known flight profile. Every German pilot had trained against predictable enemies. Spitfires turned tight, Lightnings climbed fast, Mustangs ran long. But this Mustang, didn't behave. It dived when it should have stalled. It rolled when it should have fluttered. It held G's no single-engine fighter was supposed to endure. And worst of all, it didn't die. Not from wing stress, not from jet speed, not from cannon fire, not because it was invincible, but because every engagement was a math problem, and Branson's Mustang kept solving it just fast enough to survive. The Germans called it a phantom. The Americans didn't call it anything. There was no line item, no mod code, no official name. But on paper, one thing kept repeating in post-action reports. Jets failed to acquire firing solution. Mustang evaded through unexpected turn geometry. Unexpected. That's the word that kills doctrine. Because once you expect to win and you don't, your entire system starts to collapse. And for every second a 262 failed to kill, it was burning fuel, wasting advantage, and exposing itself. That's how a slower plane beats a faster one. Not with speed, but with pressure, with response time, with lift. SOCOL didn't build a better aircraft. He just built one that refused to lose fast. And sometimes, that's all you need. April 5th, 1945, Saxony airspace, 0814 hours. The morning patrol brief was simple. Disrupt incoming German recon and protect outbound bombers along the corridor toward Dresden. Nothing unusual, nothing glamorous, just routine air cover. But what unfolded was anything but routine. Jack Branson was assigned alone that day, flying escort with external tanks, low fuel burn, high patience. The sky was clear, wind patterns stable, visibility over 10 miles, no contrails, no warnings. For the first 5 minutes, it was textbook boredom. Then it happened. Radar pinged 5 contacts. Altitude 29,000, closing fast. 5 Me-262s, out of formation, no apparent squadron leader call sign. Likely a hunter group operating off Luftwaffe's independent scramble order. Branson had seconds to react. Most pilots would dive away, break contact, or radio for help. Branson didn't. He dumped tanks, cleaned the wings, climbed, because he had something no one else did. He had SOCOL's wings. What followed wasn't a dogfight. It was a math problem solved in 19 furious minutes. 5 jets, 1 Mustang, 27 square miles of empty sky, and a pilot who knew exactly how long he could play with stall onset before the wing bit back. The jets opened in classic bracket. 2 high, 2 low, 1 center. Branson feinted left and then punched the roll to the right at 420 temper. 2 jets overshot within 11 seconds. He didn't run, he climbed. Jet pilots don't like vertical chases. They bleed too much speed. The 262s tried anyway. The central fighter followed him into a steep pitch-up, expecting a stall. But the Mustang didn't stall. It rotated. Branson yanked a snap roll, then broke downward in a spiral dive, pulling 6.8 Gs. Too much for the 262 to follow. The jet pulled out wide, lost visual, then re-entered too shallow. That's when Branson did something insane. He turned back into the formation. Now 4 jets remained, spread and confused. He didn't try to shoot, he didn't try to climb away. He stayed low, just above vapor ceiling, weaving like a snake across the high-altitude sky. Every 11 to 14 seconds, he'd pull a reversal. Left, right, roll, dive, reappear. Each time, the jets overcommitted. Each time, they missed. What confused them most was the consistency. This Mustang didn't behave like any Mustang they'd trained against. It didn't flatten out after maneuvers. It didn't stall in reversals. It didn't burn energy like it should have. The wing mod was doing exactly what Sokol had designed it to, letting Branson fly like a Spitfire in a thunderstorm. At minute 12, one Me-262 broke off entirely, low on fuel. By minute 15, a second was hit by ground flak, as it descended too low trying to reacquire. That left 3, then 2, then 1. The final 262, out of position and near critical fuel, made a last pass, a shallow climb to fire attempt. Branson didn't even respond. He rolled upside down, coasted through the jet's pass, and looped behind. Not to kill, just to remind him who still owned the sky. Then he let the jet go. Return time, 0839. Mustang. No hits taken, fuel low, engine hot, frame intact. And the final report? 5 jets engaged, none scored. Mustang maintained air superiority through repeated reversal maneuvers. Wing stress within limits. Pilot confirmed responsive lift geometry throughout. 19 minutes. 1 Mustang. 5 jets outflown. Not with speed, but with angles. And the laugh they had given Sokol back on the strip? Gone. That day, they didn't call it scrap metal. They called it survival. 0503, Eastern Bavaria. Mist above the trees. Cold air. No light. The kind of dawn where shadows linger longer than they should. And engines hide in silence. Branson sat idle on the edge of a refitted strip, the Mustang already warmed, the canopy fogged slightly from inside. His mission brief was minimal. Pre-dawn patrol sweep west of Regensburg. Observe and report. Nothing more. But nothing rarely meant peace. 15 minutes into the patrol, just as the sun cracked the horizon, he saw them. 4 silver ghosts in arrowhead formation. Me-262s. Altitude, 24,000. Climbing. Silent. He didn't have the altitude. He didn't have the numbers. But what he did have was timing. The Mustang banked left into the rising light. The modded wing caught the early air like a kite snapping taut in a gust, and Branson climbed. The 262s hadn't seen him yet. That was the trick. At dawn, light plays games. Shadows stretch sideways, not down. Depth perception fails. At high altitude, silver paint disappears against the sun, and Branson used every optical illusion to his advantage. By the time the lead jet spotted him, it was too late for a coordinated dive. Branson didn't fire. He danced. The first pass came shallow, a lazy arc, overconfident. Branson snap-rolled under and dove briefly. The Mustang held the roll, even at 415 mph. No buffet, no stall. When the second jet committed, Branson pulled hard, 6.9 Gs, then reversed right. That's when it clicked. The jets had no clue what he was flying. They thought it was a normal Mustang. They were wrong. Branson pulled an inside spiral under the lead, then flattened the dive, and reversed again. It was like flying a bird, not a machine. The modified wings didn't just hold lift. They held shape under pressure. There was no vibration, no drift, no loss of authority. That gave him options. He lured the third jet into a climb, then flattened mid-arc, using the air like a brake. The 262 couldn't correct, overshot. Then Branson looped inside, hard, stalling just short of collapse, but catching the climb at the last second. The wings flexed, then locked. The plane righted itself mid-loop, something no P-51 was ever designed to do. On the ground, a forward observer noted, "Mustang executing evasive maneuvers normally seen in lighter interceptors." But this wasn't evasion. It was performance. By minute 7, Branson had bled 3 jets off his 6. By minute 11, only 1 remained. That pilot was smart, cautious, tried to circle above, bait a climb. But Branson stayed low, flat, riding the line between stall and glide. The wing mod gave him enough lift to turn tight, but not enough to chase. That's when Branson flipped the game. He climbed, slowly, wide spiral. The jet followed, lazy, predictable. At 26,000 feet, Branson cut throttle, let the Mustang slide. Then snap-rolled left and dove. A controlled dive, not a panicked escape. The Mustang dropped like a hammer, but it didn't shake. The 262 followed. Too steep, too fast. And at 21,000, Branson pulled. Hard. 7.4 Gs. The frame screamed, but the wings held. The Mustang curled up and around like a ribbon in wind. And as the jet passed under him too fast to recover, Branson leveled. He didn't shoot. He just let the silence linger. The final jet broke east. Out of fuel, out of confidence, out of options. Branson returned at 0542. Flight time 39 minutes. No rounds fired, no hits taken, no jet confirmed. But something else was noted in the after-action log. Enemy refused to engage after 5th maneuver. Pilot reported aircraft responded beyond spec. No control loss. Mod confirmed stable. They called it the dawn trick afterward. But it wasn't a trick. It was lift, bent by geometry. Speed, tamed by timing. And faith in a wing built from scrap. When the war ended, the official record didn't mention Sokol's name. There were no medals for welders, no statues for mechanics. But the myth remained. A whisper in debrief rooms, a story passed between squadrons. The Mustang that outmaneuvered jets, not by speed, but by shape. And in that myth there was math, because numbers don't lie, and they don't flatter. They just measure what happened, and in this case they revealed something extraordinary. The Me-262 was faster, yes. Technically superior, a marvel of propulsion. But it was locked in a doctrine. A straight-line logic that said thrust outruns lift, and speed guarantees dominance. Sokol's mod threw that logic into the fire. His wing redesign didn't come from a factory. It came from hours under torn fuselages, from watching airflow over bent metal in the field, from understanding that a plane doesn't win by being perfect. It wins by being responsive at the edge. By extending surface area in non-linear ways, reinforcing load-bearing sections with bomber-grade steel, and reshaping the taper just enough to delay stall under combat Gs, Sokol created a wing that didn't look fast, but it could turn inside the future. That changed everything. Because when Branson pulled those 6.9, 7.2, even 8.0 G reversals, when he dodged cannon bursts by split seconds, when he reversed a dive in midair and forced jets to climb wide, it wasn't because of skill alone. It was because the math had shifted. Every degree of roll, every inch of lift, every second bought in the turn window. That's where the war was won. Not in top speed, not in kill counts, but in moments where expectation collapsed. Sokol didn't build a weapon. He built a contradiction. A piston fighter that could corner like a jet. A Frankenwing that held together under stress it was never designed for. A shape the Luftwaffe had no answer to, because it wasn't in their manuals. It wasn't in anyone's manuals. And Branson? He flew it not like a pilot in command, but like a partner in rebellion. Every mission was a bet that physics would bend just far enough for them to survive. And they did. Again and again. What made it terrifying wasn't its power. It was its absence from the record. There were no designations, no P-51Z or Mustang Mark X, just one modified bird flying with a whisper edge, invisible to bureaucracy, but very real to every jet pilot who tried to line up a kill and found themselves staring at empty sky. The verdict? Speed kills. But so does agility. And agility, when weaponized by timing, by lift control, by geometry hacked under fire, is a force jets weren't ready for. Sokol never patented his design. He never tried, because he didn't need validation. He had results. 1 Mustang, 5 jets, 0 losses. And a wing built from scrap that rewrote the rules, just long enough to matter. That's the legacy, not of a part, but of a principle, that sometimes the future gets outrun by what it fails to understand. They called it scrap. They laughed at the welds, the rivets, the crooked seams. They said it wouldn't hold, wouldn't fly, wouldn't last. But it did more than fly. It turned, it danced, it survived. And in skies ruled by thrust and terror, it reminded the world that improvisation isn't chaos. It's creation under fire. That genius doesn't always come in blueprints. Sometimes it comes in grease and sparks, and a man refusing to say can't. Sokol didn't wait for permission. Branson didn't wait for backup. Together they carved open a narrow window in history. A fleeting moment where scrap metal beat jet fuel, where an outlaw wing outmaneuvered the future, and where survival came down to angles, not orders. If that wing hadn't worked, Branson wouldn't have come home. But it did. So next time someone says you need the best tools, the newest parts, the right timing, remember the mechanic with a busted flap and a theory, and the Mustang that made jets miss.